Okay, so welcome to this week's episode of the Path Less Chosen pod, the podcast showing you the careers they don't teach you about in school. I'm Sol.
I'm Jamie.
And this week we have Kella on, and Kella is a friend from Bali who worked in the corporate ladder before quitting to travel the world and then also start her own startup, which is called Nomad Home, which provides luxury retreats and also dinner clubs for digital nomads.
Yeah, really looking forward to it. It's a couple of interesting bits to get into. Working for Procter & Gamble and Pepsi is no mean feat in itself. Now she's doing something totally unrelated. She's also our first guest from Canada. So I'm looking forward to getting into how her lifestyle maybe helped her get to where she is today.
If that sounds good, then without further ado, let's get her on. Thank you very much for coming on, Kella. Let's start off with asking what's going on now, what you're up to now.
So I'm currently in Bali, Indonesia, gorgeous. I'm working on our 2024 launch dates for Nomad Home. So we have retreats, supper clubs and events all throughout Europe and extending into Asia in 2024. So super excited to launch that this week, actually. So it's pedal to the metal a little bit.
So what I'm interested to know about is growing up over there and what role that kind of played into where you are now.
Yeah, so I'm originally from Canada, born and raised. And if you know a little bit about Canadian geography, I was born like in a little suburb town of Vancouver. During my childhood, really wanted to leave. That was like the defining force of everything that I did. And so moving into university, I think I kind of kept that wanting to leave mentality to wanting to leave Surrey and wanting to leave Vancouver and moving to Toronto and maybe going to New York and LA. And so I had this like image in my mind that I wanted to be this like businesswoman who lived in the high-rise apartments I never got to see and like eat at the nice places and travel to fancy places. So I think I had this like image of what adult life was going to be. And for a long time, I kind of followed that track. I did the business school, I did the case competitions in the business school, did the internships, and fast forward to when I got said job that I wrote in my little 5-year plan journal and like wanted so bad and thought that it would provide all the happiness in the world on a silver platter. I had the like classic existential crisis that every mid-20s person probably goes through. Every is a very broad reaching term, but I'm assuming you guys have read like the self-help books in which I would have bought as well. One thing led to another. It kind of brought me to a few pillars, I would say, in my life. It was like, okay, I'm at the place in which I said I wanted to be, which at the time was Pepsi. And if you read my like 5-year plan journal, it was like the president of PepsiCo Canada by X date, which is, yeah, so far from what I'm doing now. I just had a Korean like bowl at a Balinese cafe working on something on my laptop.
Sounds amazing.
Which was amazing. And I think kind of in my mid-20s, I had that pivot of, oh, this isn't bringing me joy. I don't really have a purpose and I don't really know where the point of like my dissatisfaction is. And that kind of led me to the path of entrepreneurship, which is kind of a long-winded way of saying I went through like the clear-cut career path into starting something of my own.
You started out in that corporate world, and I'm just interested to know then, when you were at school or even university, you pushed down that kind of corporate route, did you find, in the culture, or did they encourage you to actually think outside the box and go creative with your career path?
For sure. I think in UBC, they have some amazing streams. Entrepreneurship was very much one of them. I just didn't go into it. I would say it was, at the time when I was there, called it 2013 onwards, it was a less developed stream that you could enter. But the 3 very defined ones were investment banking, consulting, and brand management. And because those 3 streams were, let's call it the most prestigious, they were also the most supported. So within Sauder, which was the business school, if you wanted to, you could apply for, call it like a hyper targeted stream within that, in those 3 categories. It's a very highly selective process. You get mentors, you get teachers and funding, but the whole aim is they feed you into those job postings. So that's something that I did in 2nd and 3rd year, which then led me into brand management internships, case comps, which directly fed into signing the corporate job.
And did it feel like that was the only stream that you could take? Did it feel like there are any other options other than those kind of 3 careers you mentioned?
Yes, but these were the most prestigious. So if you can imagine, if you're 17 to 21. And there are like these three groups that were almost like, I'm not going to say culty, but like if you were in it, you were in it. You had a very like set schedule, a group of friends. It was prestigious. And I think going into that, you kind of are told that that's what you should do. And then everything else, there are definitely other streams underneath that, but it didn't come with that status or way that people saw it. But I wouldn't say that enterprising something on your own was as supported. Like there just weren't resources for that. If you were interested, you would kind of have to do that on the fringe on your own.
So did you go into first year thinking I'm going to go into the corporate world? Did you think I have no idea? Where was you aligned to the start, and then how did that change when you got to the end?
I started university at 17 and I wrote my first 5-year plan at 17. And I didn't have like the exact company, but I knew it was going to be in like marketing or brand of some sort. But I wish I kept this because I'm pretty sure Pepsi and P&G were on that list. But I was like, hey, it's going to be one of these and I'm going to be doing like in this realm. And then it wasn't until second and third year when I mentioned there's one of those like Canon streams that you could do. And that really, they set you up with everything. They teach you how to interview, they teach you how to dress, how to handshake, how to like present yourself in a room. And they essentially hold your hand until you get an internship. And then third and fourth year, as I mentioned, I was really into case competitions where growing up without a lot of money, if I wanted to travel, which I'll get into later, is a core passion of mine. I think all of my travel in my early 20s was either scholarship money or case competition dollars and part-time jobs. And so it was a little bit addicting because I was like, ooh, this is like fun because it's a little mental exercise. And also if I win a few grand, then I can go to London or New York or whatever. So that was kind of the process for my university.
And then your path led you into the corporate world eventually. So talk to us a bit about that. I'm interested to know, do you regret going into it now, or do you think there's actually important learning points during those few years you spent in there that you're now applying in what you're doing?
I don't regret it, no. Okay. But I do think that I stayed too long, potentially. So I did brand management, and for context, if you don't really know what that is in a consumer packaged good company. So for example, Pantene at Procter & Gamble, or the Lay's chip, which is you guys would call Walkers, was my first big brand at Pepsi. And everything from managing the development of a new flavor, writing the concept, to getting your R&D team to create the flavors, testing it in market with consumers, with your team, to creating and manufacturing the potatoes and putting it in the little like wrappers and making sure the lines are running, to like selling it into retailers, and then post-launch doing the full marketing plan by signing celebrities to do TV commercials and marketing. All of that is your responsibility, obviously, like with a huge cross-functional team that you collaborate with, but you are the nucleus. And so you need a touch point on everything. And so what they called it was you were the CEO of that brand in that company, and all the profits and losses, whatever happened, is on you. For example, one of my biggest, I was 21 and there was this catastrophe because one of the white cheddar seasonings was expiring, which doesn't sound like a lot, except to produce all of the white cheddar flavors in Canada is X hundreds of tons, which weighs X amount, which is going to cost like hundreds of thousands of dollars to get rid of. But it's on you to figure out where to put all of that. And I think that's so inconsequential to most people. But as an entrepreneur, when you start actually building your business, and you do need to have a pulse on every little thing of every supplier and partner that you work with, it's great experience to know how to craft the critical path, to be like, hey, at each stage of a production process or manufacturing of sell-in, this is what we need and lock down. And I think having that really early on in your early 20s, and having so many hands plugged in different places was super helpful.
I mean, that sounds like a great experience. Is there anything that annoyed you about the corporate, or I guess, why did you leave it?
I think the more you enjoy being an entrepreneur and leading, which a big part of that is steering things into the unknown and going from 0 to 1. And I think if you go to a big company and you manage a big brand, which has brand guidelines, toolkits, a huge global team that you, especially as Canada, do not like call the shots on. It's great because there's structure and you're learning from the best and the best. They've done it for however hundreds of years that the brand has existed, but you're not really pioneering anything of your own. Any innovation is likely going to be a sidestep from whatever's been done, and not going to be a big like 0 to 1 project, and you're not building a brand from scratch. And I think what I realized about myself in this process is I loved creating something. And I think I became known in the organizations that I was with to like have a big like growth mindset and creative ideas, which I wasn't really able to apply depending on which role I was in. And so I think that was the biggest rub point of, but I want to build my own thing. And you can't really do that unless you actually build your own thing.
Okay, so let's talk about that transition then. You're working your corporate job, you're talking about building something. Where did the idea for Nomad Home come from? Or did you already decide you were going to leave and then Nomad Home came as an idea?
So I mentioned my love for 5-year plans. We love a good structure. Mid 2021, I think at that point I would be like 3 years in, so a little bit into my second company that I was working at, but very, very similar role. And I think when I moved companies, it was very serendipitous timing, because they had reached out when I was kind of having that little quarter life crisis. And I was like, okay, maybe this is a sign. And if I just switch companies, I think I'll be happier. And I did that. And I was like, okay, still thinking through starting something. And so in 2021, I wrote in my little journal of, okay, January 2023, I have to resign. It doesn't matter if I have an idea, if I don't, but I'm going to start saving now. And because if I didn't write it down, I would never do it. It's like you get very comfortable, right? I'm sure if you don't know already, you'll know very soon, but all of your friends are in the corporate circle. You like have enough like spending income to live a pretty decent life. You're having a good time. You're like, wait, do I really want to be unemployed now? And like not know if this is going to work out. So I think I laid out a plan for the next year and a half. I moved out of my Toronto condo. I moved into a house with 4 of my girlfriends to save money. I did a bunch of other things and was like, hey, I'm going to make it work. And when I did resign in January, I didn't have the idea. And I was kind of freaking out because I was like, I don't know what it's going to be. Maybe it's going to be a product, a service. And I think I gave myself a few months to do traveling. Like I mentioned, it has always been, if not the number one and the number 2 passion behind food. But I was like, hey, I'll give myself a few months to travel Asia and then I'll start buckling down. Like it'll be my little vacation after 5 years of corporate. And it was during that and through my solo travel before where the idea kind of sprung up.
So you had a 5-year plan and then it turned like a 1.5-year plan. But yeah, how do you balance between putting the pressure on yourself to meet things, but then not getting too stressed out if you don't, and being flexible and adjustable to like life circumstances?
I think I've gotten a lot better as I've aged. If you talk to like 17-year-old me / 20-year-old me, I was like insufferable. Like if one thing went wrong, I was like, oh my God, this cannot be happening to me. And I think as you travel and you mellow, you realize that everything just happens in time. And everything that happens, I truly believe is meant to happen at that point to like teach you something. So a lot of people ask me, do you regret staying all that time in corporate when you could have been doing something? And it's like, no, because each experience that I've had helps me daily in some way that I can't really explain it, but it does. But I think I do 5-year plans as more of a general direction in which I'd like to move. But I also do like, this is the corporate coming out, but like quarterly reviews with myself. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, how do I pace? Like, what were my goals? And I kind of think that helps me stay on track a little bit to say, okay, if I said I wanted to do something, am I actually going to do it? which has become one of the most important things that I try to keep myself accountable to. When I decided to start Nomad Home, that was when the really intense kind of planning happened. And I think I had very grandiose plans for the first year. And although I reached a lot of them, for the ones I missed that would have bugged me a lot when I was a lot younger, I'm happy to like move them around now.
So you've got to a point where you're not stressing because you're traveling, but in the back of your head, you know that you want to start your own business, but you don't have an idea. Yeah. And then you say you came to an idea to start Nomad Home. I think a lot of people I know ask that same question, but don't get to the idea. How did you get to the idea of Nomad Home?
I'm sure you guys are familiar with like the backpacking lifestyle. I had the backpack. Can you believe, Sol? I know, shocking. I stayed at hostels. I couch surfed because I didn't have money to go through Japan. So I spent a month just sleeping on people's couches. And I was okay with traveling in a certain way that brought me to places and cool experiences. And I was like, yeah, I'm gonna rough it and whatever. As you age and you get a little bit more money and also comfort becomes a little bit more of a priority, I found that in my like most recent years while I solo traveled, I wanted to eat at Michelin-starred restaurants. I could stay at nicer places. I wanted to go to the wine tasting in Mendoza Valley and do the tasting menus. And I couldn't find a single person to want to like join me in those things. And I was like, okay, fair. I did solo travel for a reason, but I was like, I can't make this hard to like convince someone to do something like this with me. Same thing when I was in Europe, I wanted to rent these like really nice chalets or like villas and stuff like that. And I ended up doing a lot of those things alone. And it wasn't until I went to Bali, actually. So it's part of the reason why I'm back now. And as I was traveling, I ended up meeting a bunch of entrepreneurs serendipitously at like this party. And one of them is a very good friend of mine now. He came to my first retreat actually in Tuscany. He came to my London Nomad Home event, and he is probably coming back to another one in the summer. But I met a bunch of entrepreneurs that could work and live on their own lifestyle. And finally, I met someone who wanted to do all the same things. So we met in Bali and we ended up traveling the next 2 months in Korea and Tokyo together and Japan, and did all the things that I just mentioned. And it like, he just picked up and came. And then 2 months later, we met up in Tuscany and they just like picked up and came. And so I think when I met those types of people, I was like, these were the people that I was looking for this whole time. Because when we traveled together, we would co-work during the day. We would bounce ideas off of each other. I would review his website edits. Like there would be a level of friendship that went beyond just like having fun, let's say. And it was really, really nice to be able to build something with someone. And I think that kind of sparked the idea of, okay, if I wanted this to be my lifestyle, why don't I just start a company aggregating people that also wanted to do this so that we could potentially be long-term friends. And selfishly, then I could like travel the world. And even if this doesn't work out, I got a nice vacation out of it and some nice friends. And it like one thing led to another. And like one thing I like to remind myself is like suffering is in the inaction. And for so many years, I was like so unhappy because I never did anything towards what I was passionate about. But when I started meeting all of these people that wanted the same thing. And I've, in this past year, the cool people pioneering amazing projects that I've met is insane. And so it's kind of iterated from my first version of the idea, but now to what's launching in 2024 is very similar to what I mentioned I wanted to do. Like the 7-day or the 3-day retreats are going to be in like French castles or 5-star resorts in Tuscany. And our private chef is going to be people that have a Michelin star or worked in 3-star Michelin restaurants. And it's like these bespoke experiences that I find are very unique, that you wouldn't be able to find elsewhere. And everyone that comes on them with you is someone that's been hand selected and interviewed, someone who's doing either a business or a project of some sort. And the whole intent is you're building a community that's long lasting because everybody is somewhat location agnostic. They can live in London 6 months of the year, but to them moving and going to Bali for 3 months of the year doesn't mean anything. And I think like through this year, I've already met so many of them. And 4 of them are coming back that went to my retreats last year are coming back this year. It's just like a really amazing community of people.
People think entrepreneurship is trying to make the new Tesla car or trying to solve the world's computer problems. And actually it's just a basic of like, what do you want to happen in the world, and see if you can start it. I think that's such a cool way of looking at it.
Yeah, I have no interest in building the next whatever that is. It's like, I just want a cool passion project business that ideally overtakes my corporate job salary, and like I could have these cool experiences.
I'm interested to know maybe the other side of it. Was there any point where you said, what am I doing here? And like, where do I go next? What were the scariest aspects of it?
I would say like my lowest lows, like sobbing into a pillowcase in the middle of my retreat, and then like wiping my tears off to host something is probably not the normal. But I think everyone that started something will tell you the highest highs and the lowest lows will come, and all honestly pretty closely linked to each other in time wise. I was very back and forth about the scalability of this idea. This is a passion project. And so I knew I wanted to do something with community, because I also, I love hosting. So back home, I would like host dinner parties and host theme parties and whatnot. So this is very much just what came to mind of building a grassroots community. That obviously comes with challenges as you want to scale. For the first few years, I want to be at all of the locations to manage the brand. But eventually, like, the scalability is in question. So I wanted to think about whether to pivot into products, to pivot into other kind of business streams. But I think I had like a midnight breakdown probably every week this entire summer, where I was like, should I go back and apply for a corporate job? I think I actually have some applications. I like redid my resume at like 2 a.m. in like a fervor one of the months.
How did you cope with that? Like, what were you telling yourself when you were thinking to quit?
I think having a community of people that love and support you, been there since the beginning, really, really helps. I honestly think I'm the luckiest fucking person in the world, because I have amazing friends, and they would like break my legs before I go back to corporate, because they just heard me complain about it so much. Like I have a friend, Ben, who also came to one of our events, but he was my mentor in UBC, and we eventually became really good friends because we moved to Toronto, worked in the same field. And during COVID, we're both really into cooking. So we'd make a tasting menu every Friday, and that was like our little bonding thing. And for 2 years, this poor man listened to me complain about my job and how much I wanted to start something, but didn't have the courage to. And I think partially, I don't know if I told him this yet, but partially why I like wrote down my 2023 date is because I went over one time and I was like complaining as per usual. And he was like, and he's honestly like the nicest guy you'll ever meet. So sweet. And he's like, I'm so sorry, Kella, but if you talk about this one more time and you don't actually do anything about it, you can't. You just like cannot come over anymore. I was like, oh, no. But anyway, so I have people like him in my life that have kind of seen the progression, and they're like, honestly, it's not that bad. And if you lose everything and go rock bottom, you'll figure something out, because you always do. And or get like a coffee shop job. Just don't go back to corporate, because like the claws will get you and you'll get comfortable, and it'll be 2 years before you try anything ever again.
Just what Sol wants to hear before he starts in London.
Oh.
I think fascinating insights, and I think that gives us a good broad picture of like the positives and the negatives of the whole idea and the project. So to go a bit deeper then, how does it look on like a day-to-day basis? What was your lifestyle? What kind of dedication did it take each day to like flesh out this idea?
Ooh, I go on waves. Sol can probably speak to this, but I do love overall like the pleasure of living life. I am definitely not your 5 a.m. wake up, cold plunge, sauna, workout, then eat beef liver before I start my day with bulletproof coffee and then like grind for 10 hours. I am just not that gal. But I did have kind of peaks and troughs. So I am a one-person show. I had an intern for 4 months, who was phenomenal. But when I started, I built the website myself. I contacted all the sponsors. I flew to Italy, in France. I toured all of them through road trips with my great friends because I'm a terrible driver. And so I would say, call it the timeline I'll paint for last year was I got the idea in March/April when I was in Bali. I got it in my mind that I wanted to launch in 3 months in July so that I can make the last tourist period of Tuscany, which is October, November, which is truffle season, but right when the weather turns to winter. So that's a 3-month increment, which is really tight timeline to launch everything and sell. So when I was building the website, I would say I was working the long hours, like wake up, work all the way till you sleep. You probably around 12 hours. That was probably only because I am a terrible website builder. Do not look at it. That's the first investment piece I make. Thank you, darling. But that's also my third iteration because I got my friends to review it that were like UX UI designers, and they were like, out of our friendship, we're not going to let you launch this because that's just embarrassing for you. And I was like, thank you. But while I was executing them, it was also full on because you're the community manager, you're like the tour guide, you're the everything. But I would say I took most of December off, and now I'm kind of back to that same grind that I was at.
Stuff I've seen on your website, you're working in a very high end part of tourism and travel. Have you found that's a difficult part?
No, I think you need to clearly define your target market very early on. There is a lot of group travel for budget. And then there is group travel for luxury. And what I've seen, at least through my analysis, is luxury currently really caters to an older demographic or people that have made it and are established, and they can take that time and pay the $10,000 a week or whatever Abercrombie & Kent charges for their tours and let someone else take care of that. As a person who might have come into money in their late 20s, early 30s, and a little bit more time, which you see on the rise with people starting their own businesses, people in tech, just influencers, for example, a big one, is there's not really that type of experience curated for them that is truly unique, bespoke, and then also having the attendees curated. I think you see a lot of luxury services popping up. For example, the hospitality industry with the membership clubs and all of that in New York and London, I'm sure you guys know a lot of them, is like there's amenities that people are willing to pay for, but it's also you're paying for a community, right? There's areas in the luxury industry in which I saw myself as a consumer, and I just didn't see a option because you don't really want to do those things by yourself. Like having a tasting menu is great. Having 20 courses over a 3-hour window by yourself is okay.
I guess the other thing that I'd like to touch on, you've got your own business, but what sort of lifestyle are you looking to live? Are you committed to the nomadic lifestyle? Do you want to find a base? What's the plan for the next few years, and where do you want to end up?
So I actually applied for the Portuguese residency because I want the all-elusive EU passport or citizenship at some point. I'm sure as you guys do as well. Ideally, that starts this year, the Portuguese residency, and then it'll mean I have a home base in Lisbon for a good portion of the year. And then I'll only really leave for business or some travel. But I think after traveling for a while, you kind of want some semblance of home base. Like Nomad Home is to connect a community, but a lot of that community is location agnostic, not to the point in the way that I've been living so far. Like the way that I've been living is no more than 3 months in one location, and it ranges from like 1 to 3 months. So it's a lot of moving around. And I think I've gotten to a point where I'd love to get my own apartment, buy a bar cart, like get all my ingredients again and start hosting, at least for some parts of the year. But travel will always be a huge part of that lifestyle.
Do you think that nomad lifestyle is something that is worth chasing, or do you think it's overrated? I guess for people who listen who may not have experienced it.
Definitely do it. Do it for at least a period of time. I think you learn so much about yourself. This is so cliche. I do not want to sound like eat, pray, love, dear Lord, but like things will test you exactly like starting a business. There will be things that test you, whether that's like getting mugged or missing your flights or having to sleep on someone's couch who's being really, really weird. And you're like, okay, how do I like emergency 911 out of the situation? But every little thing builds up little resistance pieces in your life that make you who you are and will point you in the direction of who you're supposed to become. And I think so many people of my travels that I met have directly, by causation, pushed me to do what I'm doing right now. And so many of those connections over my X years of travel have since reached out or we've reconnected. And like, I would be a completely different person if I didn't start with that nomadic lifestyle. And I think there's a few ways to do it. You don't always have to do like the backpacking routes. There's many ways. Like I think a lot of my friends now, what they do is they do at least 1 month to 4 months in a location, and they'll live there, learn the language, kind of meld into a local, and then go back to the States or Canada. That is also a way of nomading. So whatever works for people, I think is completely fair.
So then I'm interested for Nomad Home. You talk about maybe settling down somewhere. Where does the business fit into all of that?
Ideally, this isn't a retreat business. Ideally, it's a luxury travel brand. And going back to where I grew up, which is, grew up in corporate is manufacturing. And I think I would love to see Nomad Home extend into other brand extensions. The retreat business will always be, I think, a core, because at its core, community is what we are about. But how we connect that community doesn't always have to be retreats. So that's a pillar to figure out. Another pillar is from a tangible product perspective. I also have some needs that aren't being fulfilled in a product perspective that I want to explore. And I think eventually it would be to expand it. Whether I'm in Portugal doing that or not doesn't really matter. I think ultimately I want to build a business where it is location agnostic at its core, because that's just the lifestyle I want to live. But I definitely have expansion plans.
Exciting. I guess the unknown is just an exciting part of being an entrepreneur, right?
Yeah, I think that's the most exciting part.
Exciting.
Waking up every day and not knowing what's going to happen.
Let me just deliver the final question that we ask every guest. Going back to the start, what is one thing you do the same, one thing you do differently, and one thing you tell yourself to motivate yourself? And that can be 5 years ago, 10 years ago, wherever you feel.
The one thing I would do the same is I would have gone for a corporate job in relatively a same role of what I wanted to be. So I think brand management was the absolute perfect fit for me because I love brand. I wanted to be the CEO of something, and I was young and only had lectures under my belt and had no idea how the real world worked. So I truly think that those years at Pepsi and P&G were like formative in everything. I wouldn't change that. What I would do differently is I wouldn't just pigeonhole myself in my corporate job. And what I mean by that is there were so many industries I was interested in, and I didn't want to bother people by asking them for coffee chats if I thought they were really cool. And I was like, oh, who am I for them to want to talk to me? Even though there were people pioneering really cool projects and companies that I wanted to talk to and learn from, but I was just like, oh, I'll just stay in my little corner and do the thing until I work up enough courage to quit. And I think now that I've met a lot of those really cool people that I thought were doing really amazing things, is like they were always open to chat. They were always open to sharing. I think especially I've met really amazing women founders, and a constant thing I get all the time is like, oh, I love meeting other women that like want to do X because it's a smaller community and we want to like lift each other up. And I was like, oh, if I knew that, then I would have like put myself out there a little bit more. And I think getting different opinions of different industries and how people started would have been really helpful in my early days. Okay. I think I said it before, but the suffering is in the inaction, and action begets action. Like I read you could probably name the self-help book, and I've read it in my early 20s. I sent myself to a wellness retreat in Sri Lanka when I was 23 because I was like so lost in purpose. And I remember being there, and there were actually people dealing with real issues in their lives. And I was like, oh yeah, I just don't have purpose. And what I realized later on is if you just stay in one place and you ruminate over it, there's, of course, you kind of just run yourself into this ground. But when you take little steps, no matter what it is, it kind of just makes things really, really easy as you go. And you find people along the way. It's like someone was telling me, it's like walking with a little tiny flashlight on your head. And it's not that scary, every little step that you take. And if you look around, there's actually a lot of people doing the exact same thing as you that you can walk with. And so for 5 years, or maybe not that long, but for a few years, I was like really unhappy with myself. And I think that self-esteem came from me just not doing the things that I said I was going to do. And it was like a self-fulfilling prophecy of, oh, I'm not smart enough, so I'm not going to do it. But, oh, I can't keep promises to myself, so I'm yada, yada, yada. And so I think the biggest thing I learned about myself when I started Nomad Home was I built my self-confidence. I now like pin myself to the things I say I'm going to do, and then I do them. And little by little, it builds my self-worth in the way that I see myself. And so if I just knew that, I would have saved myself so many years of like self-loathing almost.
Amazing. I think some fascinating insights there. And definitely if I'm going to be traveling in the future and hopefully have enough money, I'll be looking at Nomad Home because I saw some of the stuff you're doing. It looks incredible. Thank you very much for your time and for sharing everything.
Love you guys. Thank you.
Okay, so that was good. I think there was a fair few learnings from that. Why don't we kick off with something you've got?
I think the best one to go for to start with is she gets across quite a clear message that she believes everything that's kind of happened along the way, whether she's worked in the corporate world and when she's been traveling, definitely don't regret any of it. But the main message I think was it all was there to teach her something. She said that along the way, she's had loads of things that have tested her and things like that. She went into some detail on maybe some difficulties that she'd had, as well as all the positive, exciting bits. But she takes each thing in themselves as teaching her a lesson for that she can then apply to the rest of her life. So I really like that. And she actually put a label on it. She called them resistance pieces that build herself up. And yeah, so that was my best takeaway, I think, for sure.
I could not agree more on that. My second takeaway, and I think you're going to love this as well, is I love the idea that she has these 5-year plans and these quarterly reviews. I definitely think there's something to that. And I'm a big believer in manifesting, and not the airy-fairy manifesting, but genuinely predicting where you're going to be, because I think there's a lot of research that says that people that manifest things come true to them. I think you align your life towards a certain goal. So although it might seem ridiculous on the face of it, she has these 5-year plans. I'm actually a big fan of these plans myself, and I know Jamie likes to tell every single person in the world that he's got these plans. So,
well, yeah. I was going to say you've changed the tune, because I just remember getting stick and you and plenty of the others when you found out I had a life plan from a young age, and it was you've stolen that straight from me. 100%, I was going to pick up on that. I think the strategy she's got, it's not in a way that and I asked the question about it. It doesn't put the pressure on her that if she then misses those aims, then she kind of like kicks herself about it. But it gives her the flexibility to actually do what life circumstances bring to her, whilst keeping like a direction. I think she described it as a general direction of life and keeping that in mind. And that's her 5-year plan. I really like that, especially if you're doing the reviews and being like, okay, have I done certain goals? Have I reached certain milestones? And what's next in the next however long period?
I've got one I'm going to throw out there. It's a rogue one. So it's something I've been thinking about a lot recently, and she touched on it in multiple parts. Not chasing a career or an aspiration that is related to an ego or prestige, but actually chasing something that you're far more interested in yourself. And she heard at university there were these 3-pillar prestigious careers. Instead of chasing that, she had a more specific plan, which was to be an entrepreneur. And I think she stuck to her guns and didn't get sucked into that career, prestigious, ego-filled frenzy that a lot of people do.
It wasn't actually that rogue one, because I literally have in my 3 squares here of the ones that I want to talk about. The final one says, prioritize what means something to you and a passion project rather than something that makes you money or is to do with an ego or status.
Sounds like a good summation.
I'm gonna struggle to disagree with you, unfortunately. So let's go with that. And we didn't disagree on any of them, which is unusual. So the first one was the resistant pieces. So that everything that happens in your life is there to teach you something, so learn from it. The second one is that there is no harm in having a general direction put into a 5-year, 10-year plan, however it suits you best. And the final one is prioritizing something that means something to you as a passion project rather than to do with earning yourself money.
Sound good to me. A lot of good takeaways. Good job. And you can do the final bit, which says like, subscribe, share.
Yeah, you've just done it for me.
All right. See you in the next episode.
See you later.